Hi, my name is Christina Finnegan, and my major assignment 3 is titled, What Will You Do with Your Freedom? My essential question reads, how can Holocaust literature teach middle school students about injustice and inspire change? My 3 texts are The Children We Remember by Shanna Byers-Abels, The Island on Bird Street by Yuri Orlev, and Parallel Journeys by Eleanor H. Ayer. My first text, The Children We Remember, is a picture book, a black and white picture book, including photographs of children who lived and died during the Holocaust, along with an essay by Abels. I included the quotation by Donna Norton that reads, highly emotional periods in history are difficult to present objectively. And really the reason why I chose this text was because I wanted to give my children a starting point. I wanted them to be able to visualize and try to imagine the horror that took place during these times. The second quotation that I incorporated on the slide is by Elie Wiesel, and it reads, a Holocaust literature, the very term is a contradiction. And one of the reasons why I included this text was because I wanted my children, in addition to a historical fiction piece, to see as something that was completely nonfiction and, something that there was no arguing about. Because I do think that Wiesel brings up a really important point about the Holocaust. Finally, this book, even though it is devastating in nature, it does incorporate elements of hope at the end with the survivors. So I thought that was important as well. The second text I chose was The Island on Bird Street. And really I chose this text for a number of reasons. I think that there are many teachable moments and things that can be taught. The story centers around Alex on this lonely island and the comparisons that are often drawn between Alex and Robinson Crusoe. Alex as a child narrator, I think, will help my students to gain an aesthetic experience so that they'll be more inclined to be able to put themselves into Alex's shoes as he is a child as well. The book emphasizes Jewish values such as loyalty toward a parent, education, and pride in one's culture. It promotes a need for human action, which is really at the core of my presentation. And it's also, again, a blend of both resignation and optimism, as was The Children We Remember. My third text, Parallel Journeys, is interesting in nature. It presents 2 different perspectives of people that lived through the Holocaust, Alphonse Heck and Helen Waterford, who took very different paths during World War II, yet both of them saw friends and loved ones die as a result of Hitler's policies. Eventually, they both, however, came to believe in the importance of sharing their experiences. My rationale for my theme texts, these texts are related because they all depict the horrors of the Holocaust, but they each represent an interesting dichotomy often present in Jewish and Holocaust literature, which is a clash between tragedy and optimism. My goals of instruction. First off, the application of these texts aims to reveal the tragedy of the Holocaust, who suffered and why, who tried to help, who chose to be a bystander and why. Through the study of Parallel Journeys specifically, children will speculate why Alphonse Heck, a Hitler youth, found himself amidst the torturing and killing. And finally, after critically examining these texts, children will work to describe the possibilities that exist when individuals choose to work together for the common good of mankind rather than choosing hatred. These texts have been themes for a 7th grade class. I envision the class is composed of a majority of African American students and some Caucasian and Mexican American students, which is basically represents my current middle school classrooms. I envision this to take about 6 weeks to get through, so a 6-week timeline. And I'd like to start with The Children We Remember. Before reading, I'd like to complete a KWL chart in order to gauge students' knowledge and or misperceptions in regard to the Holocaust and have a discussion about that. During reading, questioning the author, I as a teacher will conduct a brief question the author session in order to promote questioning as I read the story to my students. And these questions might include, why did the author include a picture of this street? And why does the author show the children playing? Students will record thoughts and questions while I read the story aloud. And then finally, after the story's read, I want to be able to discuss questions and connections with my students. I'd like to ask them why they think that I chose this as a text to read to them. And the provocative question I'd like them to consider is, does the author convey ideas of hope along with horror? And if so, I'd like them to explain that for me. My second text, The Island on Bird Street. I think the before reading activities will be especially important here because there is so much history woven throughout the story. I'd like to start by reflecting on the picture book, asking again about the hope and horror. I'd then like to go into vocabulary and terms, briefly discussing the story of Robinson Crusoe and important terms such as genocide, Zionism, selection, etc. I think a map review will be really crucial as far as discussing Poland, surrounding countries, the cities with ghettos, concentration camps, and extermination camps. And finally, I'd like to watch a video titled The Rise of the Nazi Party in order to give them some background information as to how Hitler was able to come to power. During reading, I'd like to do a quick write suitcase diagram where they would try to figure out what they would take to the ghetto if they were put in that terrible situation. I then want to go into a conversation about what a ghetto actually is, along with what it was then versus, their perceptions of what a ghetto means now. I'd also like to complete an ongoing open mind activity in order to convey Alex's thoughts and feelings throughout the novel. So, for example, contemplating advice from his mother, dad, how he will get Snow back, figuring out how he's going to create his island, etc. And finally, a raft writing assignment in order to accurately portray Alex's or another character's personality and experience. After reading, I would like to visit a Holocaust survivor testimony, and I found a great website with many different intriguing accounts. So I'd like them to actually work in small groups in order to create a found poem that would reflect and basically summarize a testimony. Finally, I'd like to complete the KWL chart that we started, or actually continue to add to it, because we do have a third text to talk about. Parallel journeys. I'd like to start this by again talking about key terms. These with a specific focus: bully, authority, crystal knock, bystander, perpetrator, victim, upstander. And I'd like to do this via a vocabulary walk where they'll travel the room and chart their thoughts on chart paper and then discuss that as a class. I'd also, during reading, like to consider Alphonse Heck, which is one of the main perspectives shown in the book. I want students to be able to consider his side of things and figure out whether or not they believe that he's innocent or guilty, and conduct a debate. And I'd also like to look at other multiple perspectives that existed during this time using an online source. The article itself is titled Crystal Knock, Decision Making in Times of Injustice, but the website is facinghistory.org. After reading, here's where I hope to get that modern day connection. I'd like to read an article titled A Boy That Bullies Love to Beat Up Repeatedly from the New York Times, and students will then post responses to teacher-created questions via a blog. Who were the victims, the perpetrators, the upstanders, very much like we did, or that we will do, with the multiple perspectives that we had just researched and looked into. And then finally, a propaganda project to explore Nazi propaganda websites. Choose a poster with a partner in order to examine and analyze. And then finally, create an original piece of propaganda in order to support a contemporary issue, and then present their project to the class. The interdisciplinary connections were kind of natural. First and foremost, geography. I'd like to use a map to locate Warsaw, Poland, and the ghettos and extermination camps, and briefly discuss the weather in order to give students a true picture of the winter and what Alex faced during those harsh times. History, the KWL chart, in order to document background knowledge and new findings. Hitler's Guide to Power, discussion of key terms such as genocide, Kristallnacht, bystander, upstander, etc., and research related to survival testimony, and then finally the propaganda research. And then social studies and civics. Should Alphonse Heck be placed on trial? And the teacher facilitated debate in regard to the article and the modern day issue. What I liked about creating this text set was exploring Holocaust literature and nonfiction texts that I had not previously been exposed to, and finding a new way to approach the Holocaust in my classroom. As a result of creating the text set, I learned a comprehensive multicultural unit should incorporate both authentic historical fiction and nonfiction. That was really important for me, as I contemplated the quotation from earlier and thought about the course readings and activities. That was something that I really wanted to focus on. The third thing, what I found challenging about creating the text set project, was basically narrowing my scope. There's such a wealth of resources surrounded, such a wealth of resources about the Holocaust. So I wanted to make sure that I chose the right ones. I appropriately chose them for my grade level. So it was just really hard to root through so many valuable texts. In my future teaching, I could see myself using this type of activity to motivate my students to think critically about text and inspire school-wide change. And that was my ultimate goal for this, was to not only get students thinking about the Holocaust, but to get them thinking about real-world implications and what they can do to promote change. So again, my name is Christina Finnegan, and thank you very much for listening.